Hey there, this is the spot that the 911 is normally parked, and I've just pushed it outside so I can do more work on the engine. I'm still trying to get this car to drive. I've just returned from a short vacation. This is the final push. Today I'm going to be working on the engines right down here, working on changing the flywheel, setting up the Endplay again, and hopefully getting the clutch installed. Thank you for watching.
Garage Time.
I mentioned this before, but this stock 912 flywheel will not work with the 915 transaxle that is in my car, so I need to swap it out. Now, this is not a simple exercise. There is some critical end play measurements that actually is a bearing clearance. It's a thrust bearing clearance. That is controlled by the flywheel. Also, that nut there you can see is very high torque, so we need to get that torqued correctly and also create a seal so it doesn't leak. Stay tuned. Before I just blast this flywheel off here, I'm going to take some measurements of the ring gear relative to the crankcase. Because my new flywheel and clutch is completely custom, I want to verify that it's going to be in the same distance. It's 1.62. I think I'm also going to set up my dial indicator. Even before I pull this one off, I'm going to take another Endplay measurement. I've done this before I ran the engine. It's within spec, but I want to have a repeatable test system, so when I put the new flywheel on, I can really compare the numbers. Okay, I added this little block on my bar here so I can attach my dial indicator. It's going to go in just like that. And I'm going to put a little plastic screw here to help secure it. Now, the welding did not go well, and I broke just about every rule there is with welding. My torch, this only goes to 150 amps, and I probably could have used twice of that to do something this thick. I didn't preheat it. I had dirty tungsten, I didn't clean the metal, lots of things went wrong, but it did secure it. I mean, it's held on there, it's not gonna break off. You can see the welds right there. This one here on the side. I just kind of tack welded the corners in. But like I said, I'm not set up for this heavy aluminum like that. You need a lot more power, a lot more control on the welder. And I do specialize in thin sheet metal. I am going to offer another in-person welding workshop for automotive thin sheet metal. I'm going to put a link in the description below, but the date is November 7th, all day. It's a Saturday, 9 to 4, hands-on for you to learn how to get better at TIG welding, especially thin sheet metal like 18 or 20 gauge. Now the gauge is secured here to this bar, which will then touch the flywheel nut. I missed it. I wanted this pointer to be right here on this part of the gland nut. And it looks like I'm gonna have to probably slot this hole right here so I can just rotate the whole thing over about 1/2 inch. Okay, here's the setup. Even though I had to use a C-clamp here, I think this is an improvement over last time I had done this. And this is the first time I'm using this dial indicator gauge. I just replaced my old analog gauge with this digital one, so it's fantastic. And if you're a Patreon member, I want to thank you. This is the kind of stuff that your pledges allow me to buy better tools and show you better tips and tricks. So thank you again, Patreon members. Your support got that gauge for me. The way this gauge is mounted is actually pretty important, and I learned that last time when I used a magnetic base. I had that base supported on the engine stand, and what I found is that there's a lot of flex in both the flywheel and also the magnetic base. So this is supposed to be improved, even though I'm using a C-clamp here. I can actually flex this aluminum bar. So right now it's reading 3.5 thousandths. If I just push a little bit on that bar, that was a 1/1000th of an inch deflecting on this big aluminum bar. This is a 5/8 thick bar. So I can influence the measurement by bending the way it's attached. And the same is true with the flywheel. So the flywheel actually flexes a little bit when you push on it. That's why I'm measuring right here at the gland nut. I think that's a better measurement than if I was to measure out here on the end where it flexes more. So to get the actual measurement, what I'm doing is I have this really worn out screwdriver, and I'm alternating between, prying right here and also prying on the pulley at the front of the engine or the rear of the engine, right there where the muffler is. And I'm moving the crankshaft fore and aft. So here the crankshaft is moving towards the rear, and I have it centered at 0. And no matter how hard I push, I'm getting the same measurement. That's as far as the crankshaft will go towards the rear of the car. And then here, I'm flexing it towards the front of the car. No matter how hard I push, I can see the flywheel bending, but no matter how far I push, I'm only getting 4.5 thousandths. And I think that's a smaller number than I had before. This is the true reading. And it really doesn't matter where I do the reading or where I push on the flywheel because I'm measuring in the center. So I'm getting 4.5 thousandths of end play. I think this is a true reading. I was a little suspect on the one before. So again, back to 0. I'm pulling on the crankshaft, pushing it towards the rear of the car. Now I'm pushing it towards the front of the car, and I get the same measurement every time. It's about 5 thousandths. And it's a very repeatable number. 0, 4.5, or 5. Okay, now let's get this thing off here. This is a 3/4 inch drive, 36 millimeter socket. And I have a breaker bar here that I can add a cheater to. But we're gonna need to, help clamp this in place so it doesn't slip off because it doesn't fit well here with the flywheel. And I don't really want to grind my socket, although I probably could. So I'm gonna clamp this to the nut somehow, and then I need to create another bar somewhere on the flywheel to prevent the engine from turning. I just grabbed this out of the scrap pile, and these pre-drilled holes may actually line up, I don't know. Yeah, that's not bad. That looks like it's working okay. Okay, there's been a slight change of plans. This socket is not going to work. It's just the wall is too heavy, and it goes over the nut, but the minute you try to spin it, it just slips right off. So there's not enough engagement with the bolt here. So then I remembered that I have another socket. So this one is an impact socket. It's a 1/2 inch drive, but it has also been ground down. I don't know if you can tell here. It's been ground down to sort of mate with the flywheel. So it gets a much better grasp on the nut. And because it's 1/2-inch drive, this is something I made a long time ago. I had to go up in the attic to find this thing. But it is welded. There's this big heavy bar on here and it's welded on here. And then I just put a cheater bar over this. So hopefully this won't break. This one, because there's a big distance here, when you push down on this, it wants to spin off. And I don't want to break the nut or round the nut off. So the other thing that I found, and I remembered from last time, is I have this guy here, which also screws to the flywheel. This is from probably several years ago when I did my 356 engine. So I'll tighten that up. This will go like so. And then I have this bar that I'm going to screw it through here, and it's going to kind of clamp the socket in place. So as I put torque on it, both untorque and retorque, it's going to hold the nut on the, it's going to hold the socket on the nut. That's not going to let it slip. Some of you are like, dude, just use an impact wrench. And I think an impact wrench would definitely work, although I have an air impact, it's not that strong. But the issue is when you go to torque it, this is like a pretty critical torque value. I think it's 400 foot-pounds or more. And if your impact wrench is having a bad day, there's really no way to tell what the torque is or if it's enough. So that's why I'm going through all this trouble to try to measure the torque, both unscrewing it and screwing it back on. And I don't have a torque wrench on it, but just knowing the length and how far I push on it will give me a pretty good idea. There we go. Now I can, I think, tighten it. I just want to stand back and show you how crazy this is. This is the bar that I used for my torsional rigidity testing. These sleeves here go right on those front suspension pickup. So I'm just going to reuse it here. This is probably about 7 feet long. I'll measure it in a second. This one's about 5 feet long. So maybe it's 5 and 6, I'm not sure. And then back here, this is what I've already showed you. This contraption is going to prevent the flywheel from rotating with the torque. So the engine's not going to turn. And then this is attached to the socket, which is going to unscrew the nut. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So let's give it a try. Hopefully, this will come right off. So I'm just pushing relative to the other one. Oh, wow. This has already come loose. So let me measure this real quick because that's not enough torque. So I'm pushing, this bar is exactly 6 feet long. I was pushing at about 5.5 feet. So at 5 feet and about 20 pounds, that is 100 foot-pounds. That's not enough torque for this nut. Wow. As you guys know, I didn't rebuild the bottom end on this, and whoever put this flywheel on didn't finish the job. It requires 400 foot-pounds, and if I were to drive it like this, there's a high probability that this flywheel could have fallen right off. 100 foot-pounds is nothing for that size 36 millimeter nut. So I am glad that I discovered this. I'm going to be putting it on with a lot more torque, you guys. Going back to the regular breaker bar here for a sec. And see how it slips? There we go. This is a 12-point socket, which I don't recommend either. You should use a 6-point. There it is, there's the nut. So again, I don't like impact wrenches. I think you can tell on this nut that it does have some impact wrench marks on it, both on the tightening and the loosening side. So this would be the side where it's loosened, and that looks like it's had some impacts. The side at which it's torqued, which would be on this side, has a few marks on it, but it looks like impact marks to me. Typically, a 6-point socket will not leave those marks on it. So this may have been torqued with an impact socket, and that's not good enough. At least the wrench they used wasn't good enough. I'm going to try a few screwdrivers on both sides and see if we can just loosen it off. If not, we'll get a puller on it. Just going to throw a couple towels down in case it does fall. Nope. Nope. It's not really loosening up. I do not want to break the flange off the crankcase, and I don't want to damage the flywheel. So I am going to do another crazy rig here to try to just use a puller. Okay, I've just rigged these bars back up on here, and I'm going to try to use this puller from the inside. So I'm going to flip these jaws around and see if I can't make it work. So because these tubes are a little bit rounded, the puller is slipping just right, it's just slipping right off because the angle isn't so great. So I'm gonna try to grab it from the outside and see if that works better. We're almost out of travel. Oh, there we go. And it's off. Okay, one of the dowel pins actually came off in the flywheel. You can see it right there. So that's not normal, but I think it'll be okay. Just gotta push it out and push it in the other one. I just did some research on these seals, and this is the double lip seal. And the inner seal is okay. The outer lip is not okay. What I guess ends up happening is this outer seal is too close to the shoulder on the flywheel. So there's a radius right here on the flywheel, and that seal will run up the radius, or that outer lip will run up the radius, and it's not particularly smooth here. It starves for oil and then it gets melted. And once that fails, the whole seal fails because it just turns into like liquid mush. So I'm gonna do the best I can, probably trim it off with the X-Acto blade, and then check the end play because the shims are underneath there anyways. If the end play is good, maybe I can keep the seal. If the end play is not good, I might damage it pulling it out, we'll see. Okay, this is a brand new X-Acto blade, so I'm going to do the best I can to just take the bulk of the outer seal off. Before I Loctite that pin back in, I'm going to check the end play on the new flywheel and just see how it compares. Now this iron gasket only goes on one way. So KEP puts a much more generous relief here for the socket. It actually matches the relief I have ground in this socket. So this does get a pretty good purchase on the nut. So now we just got to put all those bars back on, hopefully get it torqued down to at least 100 foot-pounds. Yeah, that's probably 200 pounds at least. Okay, that's pretty tight. This is the exact same setup before. This bar is rigidly mounted to the engine. The flywheel is allowed to float in and out, and when it does, that motion's picked up by this pin. Let's see how it looks. Like I said, prying in two places. And I get 7.5, which is more than last time. Now it feels different to me, and I think that seal has a lot to do with it, because when it pushes up against the radius like it's not supposed to, it actually makes it more difficult to push the flywheel in and out. I can actually hear it thud. You can hear it move and feel it move. So the question becomes, is 7.5 going to be too much? The computer says that the spec limit on this engine would be 0.0067, and I'm at 0.0075. This is all in inches. And the next size bigger spacer would be an increment of about 0.002, 2,000ths of an inch. So if I went with a bigger spacer, that would bring it from 0.0075 to 0.0056, which is much closer to the target range. Now the wear limit is 0.0081. So even though right now it's within the wear limit, it's a little bigger than I like. So I'm going to order the next biggest shim, order a new seal where it doesn't have that double lip, and I'm going to choose the Viton one. A lot of people recommend Viton over the cheap one that comes in the gasket kit. That should prevent any leaks in the future. Also, I should get my Endplay right on. I think it's really important too that the Endplay is right, because this is going to be a push, actually a pull style clutch, and it's going to be wearing on a different surface inside the crankshaft or on that flange bearing. So I do want to have it as close as possible if there is any additional wear due to the 915 style clutch. Thanks for watching again. Don't forget, TIG welding class coming up on November 7th. And also, if you can't make it, I understand you might be in different parts of the world or country. I do have an online TIG welding class too. I'll put the link for that in the description below. So please check it out, and thanks again. See you next time.